This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace therapeutic services of any kind. Please refer to the list of references provided if you need support.
Welcome, everybody, to another Sessions with Sara Cate and Ashley. I'm Ashley.
I am Sara Cate.
And I just feel like we need to pause here for a second, because if you're watching us on YouTube, you see something very fancy in front of us. But if you're listening, can you tell the difference? Because we got our boy Blue here.
Woo! Our boy Blue! Which is actually white. The microphone is white.
Yeah. But it's our boy Blue. But anyways, we got a new microphone and we feel very accomplished because we set it up by ourselves.
Wow, you guys. Technical advances over here are
we tested
at 100.
We tested it out. And so
let us know if the sound is better.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be. It can't not be.
Right.
We were working with nothing, so like we're even a degree better.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Very excited.
So we are going to talk about well, it has been
dancing around.
Yeah. So it's been a year since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And you know, the circles that I'm involved in, the people that I am around, there's some heaviness that's been brought back this week. So this will air about a week from the actual like year anniversary of it being overturned. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I vividly remember where I was when I like actually heard the news, and I remember how I felt, and I remember going to the rally and how I felt being there and all of the things that came. And so, you know, as Sara Cate and I discuss like what we should talk about, there are things that come up that were like, not yet. And there are things that were like, yeah, let's do it. And I think this one was like somewhere in the middle, because it is it's just a really big thing. And there are so many feelings obviously around it. And we want to tackle this conversation in a way that aligns with our values and how we present ourselves in the world and how we hope to provide space for our clients. And so we're coming at it from that lens of a discussion more for support, a discussion for hope versus demise, and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, what Ashley's speaking about is it's really important. And regardless of whether you are for or against the overturning of Roe v. Wade, you felt something. And so, you know, we really want to, yes, we have our own opinions here. We are very much advocates for women's health and women's rights. And so we will lean in a direction always that supports access to healthcare and services. And we honor and recognize that everybody has a perspective and a perception. So if this doesn't align with you and your values, you know, you can move on to the next episode. But I also invite you to sit with this conversation that we're going to have, because we're going to be talking about body agency, and the concept of what it means to be in control and the agent of your own body. And that goes well beyond the confines of legal, political, social, emotional structures. I mean, this is overarchingly something that every human being could benefit from connecting to, is a sense of agency and ownership over their own body. So again, we're going to share our perspective. If it's for you, great. If it isn't, great. You know, we're here to use this platform in a way that, like Ashley said, aligns with our values and our beliefs, regardless of how even ours are the same or different. We don't, you know, so it just really, this is a space to have a conversation around the way in which we interact with our own bodies and our
Yeah.
own kind of connection to that. So I just wanted to throw that in there too. But as we move on to this, delicate and important conversation, I want to just kind of orient you to the expert in the room right now, which is Ashley.
Well,
Dr. Ashley, if you will, because she really is such, she has such a wealth of knowledge and experience on the topic of body agency. She's developed a program that is phenomenal. I've had clients who have gone through it and loved it. And it's called Claiming Body Agency, and you can find it on her website, which is linked in our show notes. Check it out, because if after this conversation you're at all curious about, for you, how this all applies, and for you how you can dive in and explore this, your guide is this girl. I trust me. Like, she knows it, she gets it, she eats, sleeps, and breathes it. She really is kind of who I really send all of my clients to, who are ready to explore their bodies and the ownership over their bodies in a different way. So that being said, Dr. Ashley, she really is a doctor. I'm not just saying that. Like, it's legitimate. But Dr. Ashley, can you help the listeners understand, if they haven't explored this kind of concept before, of like agency, body agency, claiming body agency, like maybe start with what you really feel like agency is, but then the deeper kind of into the nuance of it, what claiming body agency really means.
Yeah. So I think, when we say agency, you can also use, like, you might be more familiar with autonomy. That word gets thrown out there a lot too. So kind of think of those as interchangeable, because it just kind of depends on who you're talking to or what setting you're in, like what word you hear. And just very plainly, one word, it means ownership. Now, that word can be super nuanced and deep. But when you think about it, it is the agency over your body. And I'm going to use body, but then I'm going to kind of break this down, is the undisputed. And that word is important. The undisputed ownership of your body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah, goosebumps.
Oh
yeah, that's really lovely. I like that you use undisputed. I think that is an important word in that statement.
It is probably the most important, to be honest, because it's not conditional. And if it is conditional, it's not there. And I think what you hear a lot, and one of the things that I think was really brought forward in my understanding of all of this when Roe v. Wade was overturned, is we focus a lot on the physical, like the physical over your physical body, because that's what was being fought over, of like whether or not you have the right to do something or not to your own body. But you are not just your physical vessel, right? Like the physical part of you is your little thing that you're here walking around on earth with, but you are so much more than that, and including your mind and your spirit. And to fully have agency, meaning that undisputed, unconditional ownership over who you are, includes your spirit and your mind.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that's the first time you have heard it spoken about like that. Maybe you don't agree with me at all. But that's what I believe, because I fully, with every ounce of me, believe that just because you were born, you deserve to have that agency or that ownership over your body. There's no, you don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to complete certain steps first. Like, you were born, and so you deserve it. That is part of being here.
I mean, God, it so is. And we are unfortunately so deeply disconnected from that because of colonization and slavery and the way that we treated the indigenous when we came, like how we, you know, like, and I'm speaking as a white woman, like recognizing that and acknowledging that like there have been historical, and especially women who were sold into marriage and are today, like, let's not get it, you know, confused that this shit's not still happening. That we just don't have ownership over our bodies, over our beings. And, you know, so I think that's why I got the goosebumps when you were talking about the undisputed, like nobody can say that you don't. Like, yes, they will try. And yes, people who abuse us and people who, you know, and this, you know, we should have maybe make a bigger trigger warning at the beginning of this conversation, but, you know, I work with women who, well, I work with women. And so let's just talk about the statistics of sexual assault and sexual abuse. 1 in 3, and that's what's reported.
Right.
So I just knowing that sexual assault is one of the most incredible perpetrators of taking body agency and body ownership. And so I think like when you say, so working with that line, Ashley, of like helping your clients get to that place where they can reconcile, like it is undisputed, regardless of what has happened to me, regardless of what my historical, my cultural, my, you know, lifelong experience has been with people stripping my agency. How do you, you know, start to the conversation of helping that undisputed ownership come in for them?
So it's a lot of what we've already talked about on this podcast is we have to find the way in. And when I say that, like, okay, so my background is in pelvic health. And so what I realized is that, you know, people would come in because they would have this physical presentation that they wanted different. They were in pain. They weren't feeling pleasure with sex. They weren't, like, all of the things that could happen in your pelvic floor area. But what was really sometimes where we needed to go had nothing to do with the physical body, because your physical body sometimes is just too strong of a gatekeeper to allow change to happen, and that's okay. And so that's where, when you're working with sensation, is it might have nothing to do with your physical body where we start. And I think that is maybe one of the things that, you know, people don't think about, that how, like, all of this, so like what your physical body, your spirit, and your mind, like, people maybe don't recognize, because of the society we're in, how each one influences the other, and how we can't separate them out. And like, yes, sometimes we need a knee specialist, right? But in these bigger things that are happening and that we experience, and we can't separate it. That's not taking who you are and appreciating the intricacies, the uniqueness that makes you. We kind of throw it out the window if we think that we can separate it out. And it's just not fair to yourself to think that you have to piece it out like that, because it removes you from being whole. Like, we are whole regardless of if we have, you know, these scars in these wounds. Like, that doesn't make us not whole. That gives us guidance into how we move forward in our life, but it doesn't mean that we're not whole. And and to continue to be on the path to feeling that, because I think people will say, like, they're on the search for wholeness, right? Or we're not here to be perfect, we're here to be whole. But being whole means that we have all of these parts and we acknowledge them.
I love what you say there, because I think it's easy for us to feel like things are out of our control when we've had the wounding that we've had. And why I think Roe v. Wade was so triggering. And I had to explain this to one of my friends. He is a man, but he asked me the question, which I really, really appreciated. And he was like, why are people so triggered by this? And I was super, stoked that he was willing to have the conversation rather than just be like, this is ridiculous. It's, you know, it's back to the States. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, you have to understand when things have happened to you that were out of your control, anything that then again threatens your ability to decide or be in control of what happens to your body, your being, you will get triggered. You know, it's resonance, it's reflection. It's like, well, if they can take, if this has already happened to me and someone has taken my right to be in ownership over my body or my being, and then the highest court in the land takes away this access to services and care that people might absolutely 100% need, it is going to trigger that part in us, that wound in us that says, here I am again. Here it is again. I am not worthy. I don't have value. I'm not deserving of safety and protection. My being isn't. And that, you know, where we have to come back towards ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love the name of your program, is the Claiming the Body Energy, because it denotes a participation from your clients in choosing that. They have to claim it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about how that kind of all comes together.
Yeah. So, you know, like I said, like, where do you start? You start wherever your body lets you in. Like your whole self lets you in, because there are things that I, you know, as a practitioner and going through my own women's health struggles and going through a situation where having a miscarriage, and that would have been considered me aborting. And the threat of like that I wouldn't have been able to receive care. I think what really has like fueled like my passion behind this is there is just information that people need to know about their body. And it starts truly truly starts from the time we are born. Now, like, so this is kind of how I like describe it. Like when you're born, you're obviously unable to take care of yourself. You rely on your primary caregivers, whoever that is. They often take over some of your agency to keep you safe in certain instances, but you come out of the womb knowing. You come out of the womb knowing when you need something, when you're feeling unsafe, when you're hungry, all of that. You innately know how to control your body, right? And then what happens is, again, obviously we need our caregivers to keep us safe, to get us around and to feed us and provide these things. But then what happens is, especially in those who have a vulva, uterus, ovaries, a combination, or one of the above, our agency is often transferred into society. Instead of teaching us how to understand our body so that we can make decisions that put us in a place where we can support our ownership. And what I mean by that is we, one, don't know the anatomy of our body. The thing that people say the most after a session with me is like, oh my God, why wasn't I taught this before? Two, I wish I would have known this a really long time ago. And it could be just the anatomy discussion. It could be that you had no idea that you were more than what you did for a living, how many kids you have, what purpose you serve in other people's lives, that you are still able to have this connection to yourself. Like most people don't know that, like when I say like having a relationship with yourself, like most people that I work with, they're unsure of how that even like looks. Like it's such a foreign concept, because when we go through this adolescent period, when you think about period education, when you think about the anatomy education, when you think about the sex education, when you think about how we are taught to respond in relationships, speaking again, not to those who have a penis, because they have a much different experience. Not to say that every penis owner's experience is lovely, but in this situation, there's a huge difference in what is lacking. And so then we place these girls, and it's just gotten unfortunately worse because of social media and these like ridiculous standards that we are upheld to. we place these young females in adolescence and their teenage years and their early adulthood, and they don't know themselves. And so how are we, one, supposed to understand what this ownership of our body is, two, supposed to make a decision that's going to affect the rest of our life, and three, then go home at the end of the day and be okay with ourselves? Like, when you think about like this huge discrepancy between the two, penis owners or non-penis owners, when you think about that and like the lack of support and knowledge that we're giving these people, and then all of the societal constraints that are put on us, and now then all you hear about is how like the rights are being taken away to say that because you have a body, you deserve to make decisions about it. It's now somebody else's control. It's it shouldn't surprise anybody why suicide rates are skyrocketing in young females. Like we've never seen before
numbers like this
in existence of being human. And I just, when this all happened, it was a very big, like, oh my God, people can connect to like, okay, this is something to do with like body agency or body autonomy or whatever, but we're walking around not even understanding that the autonomy and the agency is so much more than over our physical body. And we deserve to have the ownership over everything, over all of it, just because you're here, just because you were born. And, I don't know. It's like, I always tell people that like this, until the day I die, if I have an opportunity to help somebody else understand their body and to teach them about it, I will be 102 on my front porch swing, calling all the young neighborhood girls over to have a conversation about this, because why it's not available, I still don't really understand, unless, well, that's really dark. We could go down the rabbit hole with that one, because there's power, it's all about power.
It's all about power.
But yeah, I don't even know what your initial question was.
You're still tracking, girl.
Okay.
Well, it's just it's what you're getting to is that like there is a primal and developmental gap in education around this. And so when then as adult women, we find out, speaking just about, Ashley's clients, but then as adult women, that we find out that, and this goes for anybody who, is challenging their gender identity and recognizing that they don't feel like they're belong in the body that they're gendered in. Like, this is about when we recognize that something isn't aligned, like that I am not somehow in control or in charge, probably even from information that's coming in outside of us. We don't recognize that we can take care of our body, that we can protect our own body. To your point, when you were speaking about it, of like these young girls not ever really being, our health education for women is trash. And I'll just call it a spade a spade. And so these young girls grow up not believing that they have any control over their own body. It is hard then to protect it. If they are not owning it, then it is hard to protect. They don't realize they deserve to protect it. And then oftentimes, unfortunately, people around them are intensifying the disconnection, because we have all of the conversations about she was asking for it, she had been drinking, she was wearing a skirt, exactly. Like then it's their fault. And I can't tell you how many clients that I have sat with whose families, whose churches, whose leaders, whose mentors, whose teachers, whose physicians have not given the credibility or the respect to the person enough to say, this is not your fault.
Right.
You did not choose this, right? That conversation happens such a small amount of the time, which is where I get infuriated. But it really is heartbreaking to think about all of us running around in this world, not recognizing that we have ownership over our bodies. And that, or that we could, and that we were owed that from our inception. And, I think just to kind of push the conversation a little bit further, Ashley, you know, what is this like? Because we know the healthcare system is broken, right?
Yeah.
So even if you advocate for your clients and they start to recognize, wow, something's going on in my body. And let's say they can even identify that and they go to the doctor, right? And don't get me wrong. I have a, you know, best friend who is an MD. I work with doctors and nurses. Like I have a strong respect for some of the medical professionals in my life. And I also recognize big pharma and ego and
just what you're taught.
Taught in school, how they are the expert in the room and they know all and they are the one. And if a woman were to go in and have a concern or need something and that doctor, you know, were to.
So, okay. I think that we like, yes. Okay. Ooh. Well, this could be like, how long do you guys have? We'll be here through the night.
We'll be here forever.
Because I think we need to pause and I hope that what I am about to say kind of sparks your interest and helps you, especially if you are a white person, helps you maybe decide to give yourself a little bit more education. And when I say give yourself a little bit more education, I mean, you do the work. You don't ask somebody who is a person of color to do the work for you and teach you. I mean, you do the work. But what we have to realize.
Where's the applause?
What is a couple of things that when you look back, so we are in this society that was built where there was one, if you were a white male, that was ideal. And the society that we live in today was built around that. Now, before you come at me, this doesn't mean that white men are bad or that I'm like bashing white men. So like, I've heard that before. It's a tired argument. Like, get over it.
We're all tired.
That is not what this is saying. This is just saying that the fact is, every single system that we belong to was created for this person. Now, women, then underneath that, or if you own a uterus, ovaries, or a vulva, we're underneath that. People of color, underneath that. And the way you can kind of think about this is if you have never had to fight for your rights, which is only cis white males, I don't know that you're going to fully understand unless you really listen to others who have had this lived experience. Because when you think about it, like women weren't allowed to vote. Women weren't allowed to buy a house. You couldn't have a bank account. You couldn't do anything. You literally had to have a male partner in your life to survive. Now, as awful as that is, the experience for people of color, and especially for women of color, it is so, I don't have the words to describe how incredibly awful that is. And so when we're talking about like the healthcare system, we have to think about, when you think about like women's health, like OB-GYN is involved in that, obviously, right? And the history of gynecology is dark. It's disgusting.
It's the experimentations.
Yes, it was essentially experimentations done on Black women because it was believed that they did not feel pain. And this is not old. This is not that old. And so, and that is how the quote father of gynecology did his work. Now, all that to say, we are here in a moment of time where we have a couple of options. We can be quiet and just continue with like how things have been going. Or as part of this, you recognize that if you hold the privilege of being white or being straight, that you are not fully participating in a world where you believe that agency is for everybody unless you are fighting for the agency of everybody. Because when you're white and you go into a doctor's office, you're going to be treated differently than if you are of a different race. And that is one of the things that happens. And we know the research is there, you guys. It's not, this isn't just like people like making shit up. Like,
and
they're
like throwing their opinions out
right.
there.
Like,
this is scientifically.
this is research. When you look at, if you want to go further into like women's healthcare, when you look at, there are states who still believe that Black mothers can't breastfeed. And so they don't even talk to Black mothers about breastfeeding because it's not believed that they can. This is real. This is today. This is not 50 years ago. This is today. And so that's like my caveat, is if you're here to only support yourself, if you're white, I'm questioning your intentions. And I'm not afraid to say that. I'm questioning why you're even trying then. Like, I believe that we all have agency, but I believe that in order to truly have agency over yourself, we need to also help the people who don't have the privilege that we do.
Yes.
So the healthcare system.
God, Ashley, thank you.
The healthcare system is a very interesting place because Western medicine saves lives. Like,
100%.
it saves lives, and it is there in catastrophe and trauma. And like, you could be in constant awe of all of the things that we have already discovered and all of the things that we have yet to discover. This is not bashing Western healthcare.
No.
What it is saying is that, unfortunately, and let me say this also, because of our healthcare system, oftentimes the information that doctors are given regarding, like, here is the magic drug, right? Like, here's what helps. Like, the fact that
Big Pharma,
that OxyContin was like sold to doctors because they told them that people who were in chronic pain wouldn't get addicted to it, right? So this isn't just like doctors suck and they're bad, but it's like, it's a larger problem. There's so much more going on than just saying like doctors don't listen. They often also usually have 2 minutes to be with you, and that's it. And how are we supposed to get anywhere if you have 2 minutes to listen to somebody?
right.
And then what happened is, like, people wanted like this holistic healthcare, and that meant that a doctor was then asking you how you were feeling. Like, that's holistic. If they spend $5
Who's got a $5 doctor? Because either I'm going or I'm terrified. I can't decide which one. I don't know which one.
Because the doctor's spending 5 minutes to ask you, how are you doing? But then there's no follow-up to that. Okay. So when you're thinking about yourself existing in the healthcare system, especially if you have a uterus, ovaries, a vulva, or any of the above, or one of the above, I think here is probably my biggest piece of advice of what I tell people most often, and what I do myself, what I practice myself the most, is I listen to that ick factor. And the ick, you know when somebody isn't providing something right, in terms of like, not doctors, like just in general, life in general, right? Like, we all have felt that feeling.
Yeah.
That takes precedent over everything. I don't care. I don't care what your attributes are. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care what it says on the wall. If I don't feel safe around you, I don't feel safe around you. And that's it. That doesn't mean you're a terrible person. It means you're not for me, and that's okay. And if somebody tells you that you have to just live with it, huge red flag, run. So this was just told to me actually about a month ago. I had a question about something that was going on, so I asked a flat out question, and their response to me was, well, that is too deep of a topic to get into. Excuse me. What? So bye. Also, I'm never coming back. And that's okay. I think, doctors are experts in their particular place. They have so much education, but that does not mean that they know everything. And that does not mean that they are the only person that can take care of you. And that, above all, does not mean that they know more about your body than you.
That's it. Mic drop. Keep going.
And so
keep going.
And so that's not how your healthcare provider should interact with you. It should be more of a conversation of, you're showing up with these concerns because they're real concerns. and they're listening and they're helping find a solution. There's a difference in helping find the solution and a Band-Aid, right?
Mhm.
Now, if you are wanting something more than the Band-Aid, you deserve it. You can have that. Unfortunately, it takes a little bit of courage from yourself to, and maybe sometimes it's maybe not courage, it's just the permission that you give to stand up for yourself,
Mhm.
to ask questions. And if,
Being your own agent
yes,
for your body.
And if they're unable to answer the question, and here's the thing, it's not an inappropriate response if you ask the doctor a question and they're like, you know what, I'm actually not sure. I'm going to have to do some looking into that. That's not a bad answer. That's like a cool, they want to like dig into this,
Mhm.
right? Because like, what if you come in and you're like, so like friend with a similar thing, like they're using this, how do you feel about that? Do you think that could work with this other medication I'm taking, or whatever it is, right? Because we all have different things going on. If they are willing to say, I'm not sure, let's look into it, great, proceed.
Mhm.
Right? But if they're unwilling to hear you, if they're telling you that you just have to live with it, which we hear a lot because we're women, we hear that you have to like live with incontinence. We hear that sex is just sometimes painful. We hear that like some women just don't orgasm. We hear that this is just an aside, but another little like tidbit of how the history of women's health is so fucked up that like hysterectomy, which means the removal of your uterus, comes from the term hysteria, and we all know what hysteria means. Crazy, right? That is how this was born, is by thinking that women were actually crazy. And the amount of women who have laid on my table and told me that their doctors have told them that they are crazy is insane. It is, I mean, nobody should ever be told that. And the thing that,
Especially around their health.
yeah, and I think you know, all of this could be lumped into like just a blanket term of like you know, medical trauma or what, like if you want to like lump it into this thing. And I think that there's an important distinction, is it doesn't mean that like it's a huge crazy big like the doctor like smoked you over the head with something, right? But the most impactful type of trauma often is that you weren't heard and your voice wasn't treated as if it is the most important thing in the room in that moment, because again, they are there to be like to facilitate helping you find a solution, but they are not the experts over your body. There's no way they can be. But if we're not taking responsibility to have that ownership over ourselves, then all of this goes out the window, because they can't do it for you. I can't do it for you. Sara Cate can't do it for you. You have to find that within yourself.
I mean, Ashley,
I feel like I just talked for 8 hours.
But all relevant. It's all relevant. Like it really is, because what you're speaking to is the broken Western medical system. Again, we are not shaming, judging all doctors. It's just healthcare. First of all, healthcare already has massive misses on really treating what's going on specifically for women and women of color, indigenous nations, all of those groups. And it also is culturally what we're taught we should accept. And what we're allowed to be given and what we deserve. And so like, you know, for a white woman, even advocating for her health is going to look different than a woman of color, because how differently we're treated. So we're not going to make we're going to be explicit about our own privilege, even as we talk about these things. But to Ashley's point, claiming body agency means that you do become a fierce advocate for your health. You become the agent of change for your system. And it is fucking hard and it is terrifying. And when a system has historically not given you the audience, it is going to feel completely counterintuitive to getting what you need. And, you know, this conversation is an invitation to think about what it could mean for you to become the agent of your own body, to take what was it? Undisputed ownership. I'm going to live in that. Undisputed ownership over your body, regardless of what has happened, regardless of what you have experienced, regardless of what history tells you. I mean, it is courageous to look at all of those things and choose to try to do something different.
Yeah.
And so, as we kind of bring this full circle, Ash, I just want to give you a little bit more room to maybe speak to, as people start to take ownership and as we're challenged, with me and my clients, same thing, the sensitivity that they've experienced this week, we're coming up on the, anniversary trauma is real. And so we feel things that maybe we were feeling last year around this time. So then a lot of my clients who have a sexual assault history, that trigger, that tenderness is coming up, that pain is coming up, how do you encourage, our listeners who are coming into this conversation curious or maybe even open to starting to take care of themselves in a different way? What is maybe one small way like that they can kind of, other than taking the whole course and program, what is one small way even today that they can take care of themselves and their agency, just to kind of like in this time?
I think the first thing that you truly need to do is to acknowledge how important that decision is that you just made, and to acknowledge how hard that can be and how tender your heart can be through all of this, and to give yourself a little bit more credit than what you're maybe giving yourself right now, and to offer yourself some compassion.
Yes. For what you're feeling.
Yes. And that is truly step number 1. And step number 2 is curiosity. Because unless we're curious, because I like mentioned in the beginning, our physical presentation is going to tell us one thing. How we are feeling spiritually is going to tell us another thing. And when I talk about spiritually, just like a quick little, I don't mean religion. I mean spirit, truly spiritus, truly meaning of oneself. That is what spirit is. And so like it is your highest expression of you. That is what I mean when I talk about like your spiritual presentation, and the presentation in your mind, your emotions, your mental health status at the moment. Like we don't know. I don't know without, well, I won't know until you tell me where you feel like you can connect a little bit more. And so just be curious. Be curious about where your body will let you in. And when that happens, when you realize where maybe you want to spend a little bit more time, that's all you have to do. Like it just sounds presence. Just presence. Like it sounds so, I hope it doesn't sound like super cliche, because it's not easy by any means, but the first step is that curiosity, is compassion and curiosity. And from there, then you'll know. I can't like stress the importance of support enough. I have like a very soft spot in my heart for adolescent females, because I see the numbers increasing of extreme depression and suicide. I see those numbers increasing, and it's not getting better, which is terrifying and should terrify all of us. And unfortunately, the way things are set up right now, it has a real potential to even get worse. And I don't say that to be like so like pessimistic, but I have this really soft spot in getting it so that our future generations just don't have to deal with this shit. And unfortunately, putting the burden on that younger generation who is just coming into their pubescent, their adult body, that's not fair. That is not leading them into a life of success. That is putting a burden on them that is too big to bear. It is our responsibility as the older generations to create the change so that they don't have to deal with it. And I've heard, this is also like just so crazy that people still feel this way. It's like, well, I had to go through it, so they will too. Like, go home. I don't want to hear it. It's stupid. It's just dumb. Like, what? Like, we should be so excited. Well, this is me. I am so excited to know that there are people who want to make a change in themselves. But the thing is, when you make that change in yourselves, you have no idea the impact you have on the future generations. And that is like what keeps me going so much. That is where all of this passion comes from, is because they don't deserve that. The ones who
we didn't deserve it.
Exactly. We didn't,
and they don't either.
Right. And we get to be the change makers, but it takes that courage. And I want you to know that, like, you're not alone. You're not, I promise you, you're not alone. And that's where the community comes in. You reach out to us if you need support. We have resources listed. You should mention the one resource after this. Don't let me forget. But we have these resources listed. And so we want you to know that you don't have to do this alone.
Access is there.
Access is there. Access is there.
Well, and I mean, if you can't hear, but you can, well, now, because we got our boy Blue here, how passionate Ashley and I are about this, and especially Ashley, because of what she sees, what she works with, and I mean, she built an entire fucking program around this. So there's a reason that I wanted to really highlight her voice today in this topic and in this conversation, because she holds such a degree of understanding and awareness around the barriers and the blocks that so many people have around that fierce ownership. And yes, reach out to us, access our resources on our resource page, and you'll find another one on there today. It's the National Women's Health Institute.
Nope, it's not. Hang on.
And we found this, and we went through, like, Ashley and I both went through, and it's an incredible resource. The National Women's Health Network. And we've tagged it it's like linked in the show notes. Please check out their services. There's a million other incredible services for women out there. Hey, Jane, I was going to tag. There's a bunch of ways for you to access resources, even if you feel like you don't. And we want to be one of those as well. So, just to kind of bring this to a close, I just want to thank Ashley just for her passion, but but it's true.
That's so nice.
Your passion, but like also your expertise and your wisdom on this. And because we need more people creating opportunities for people to explore these ideas and these concepts, specifically around body agency, and specifically around such a poignant time in history where it's like, this shit's up. And so we need to explore it. We need to look at it. We need to understand it. And so if you're curious, as Ashley said, please reach out to her, to us. And again, kind of as we close every session, it's like, can you have a greater degree of compassion for yourself? So if you're feeling something, some sort of way about any of this, giving compassion to what you're feeling, because that's going to be the root of change, is when you give permission to the feelings that you're feeling about this: anger, rage, scared, fear, doubt, self-worthiness, shit, whatever it is. The more that you offer compassion to that, the more potential you have to do something different. So leaving you with that extra dose of compassion and care. Thank you for sitting with us today. And if you need support or resources, please reach out.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.